Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our new moon that is happening on the 7th. And it's going to be at 5:22 p.m. here in Hawaii, and that is 8:22 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And this is a really big new moon for us for a couple different reasons. We'll start with the fact that it's in Aries. It's in the first sign of the zodiac. And this is particularly in a star called Bharani, which is shown, the symbol is the female yoni, the downward triangle, the portal of life. And it's ruled by Yama, the god of death. And this relationship between life and death, this portal of life and death that we're passing through, is the very first new moon of the zodiac, right? As we begin into like there's spring, and we had our full moon across from this already, right? Our full moon came before the new moon in this case. And now we have this new moon setting us off on this cycle of beginnings. And what are we birthing forward into this world? And how are we birthing forward what we're birthing into this world? Yama has a relationship with our sense of control, our ability to restrain ourselves. If you think of the word in relationship to yoga, we have pranayama, right? We have our breath control practices that we do, where we're literally like harnessing our breath in a very specific way, whether that's through counting, whether that's through using your fingers, whether that's through specific mudra. There's these different practices we do, and we have to do them, right? We're not just breathing wildly into the air. We're making specific choices on how we do that. And then we also have, as the first two limbs on the 8 limbs of yoga, on the Ashtanga, is the yamas and the niyamas. And the yamas are these like things we don't do, right? They're these restraints. We don't steal. We don't harm others, right? We don't lie. And then the niyamas are the things we do, our observances, right? We do surrender to source. We do keep ourselves in a state of purity. These are things we're observing, we're doing the opposite of yama and niyama. And so this is the energy we have to go into this with, where we're really paying attention to what we are not doing and what we are doing. What are we wanting to bring forward? And what are we not wanting to bring forward? Or what do we need? What ways do we need to restrain ourselves so that what we bring forward is a reflection of our highest self, of what's in our heart, and not our demons and our fears and our anger and all of the other things that surround us in this world. So this is a really important portal for all of us. And of course, for each of us, it's going to be in a different house, and the sun and the moon rule different things. And Venus, her presence there, is going to mean different things to each of us. So this is a really wonderful time to understand what it's doing in your particular chart, which is why I do these forecasts for all 12 signs. I do them weekly, and whenever there's a big transit or there's a full moon or a new moon, I write about specifically what that energy is for each of the signs. There's a link that you can get that if you would like in the description of this, and I'll put it at the end of the video as well. You can go onto my website, radhahomeastrology.com, and you can get that breakdown. And I also have one sending out right now as a gift of Jupiter's transit that he just made into Taurus as well. So for each of us, we're starting something new in this place, right? And then 3 lunar phases after this new moon, we have what's called the most blessed day of the year. It's called Akshaya Tritiya. This is, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for this, because this is a really important thing to sort of understand and look at, is that we have this most blessed day happening on the 3rd lunar phase, Tritiya, after the new moon in Aries. And this happens every year, right? Every year. Often it's in April. This year it's in May. And so we see in this case, our sun and moon came together at 2350 in Bharani. So kind of later in the signs, 30 degrees in every sign. So it's like towards the end of Aries that we're having this new moon. So when we get ourselves in just one day later, and of course the new moon is that point when Amavasya ends, when the sun and moon come together. So Pratipad, the first phase, starts immediately after that, just for clarity. So here we are, in our next phase, and it's the 8th, and we already have our moon well into Taurus. And it's in Kritika, which is actually the nakshatra that the moon is exalted in. Kritika is the Pleiades, as it's better known, and it's a place where I just spoke about in my Jupiter videos. If you want to hear the story of it, you can watch my Jupiter and Taurus video, because Jupiter is here too, right? And I mean, this is Hawaii time at 5:22, right after, you know, the same time as the full moon happened. But look, I mean, earlier in the day, we have this conjunction between the moon and Jupiter, and the moon is in her most exalted place. The reason the moon is so exalted in Kritika particularly is because we're really able to cut through the fat of our emotions, like the sense that we have of being up and being down and being all around in this tumult that is the moon in Scorpio, where it's debilitated, is grounded in Taurus, which is why the moon likes this sign. She likes the sign because we're just doing what we need to do to take care of our bodies, and that takes care of our mind. We're able to just keep an even keel because we're not drowning in our emotions. Kritika adds an extra element where, instead of maybe getting enraptured in some of the sensual pleasure that comes later in Taurus, we have this vision, this ability to see. Kritika is ruled by Agni, and we're really able to cut through that which is like just attachment. And that's why this star, as exalted as it is not a great place for marriage, because it's a place where actually the wives of the sages were cast off. Like there's a separation in many ways present in this sign. I mean, in this star. But just to clarify, the moon is exalted at this point, and Jupiter is joined. So we already have the reason why Akshaya Tritiya exists. Many people, and I literally read an article this morning from a very well known and established app on these things, and it was like talking about how Tritiya was the word that was so important. Akshaya is the word that's really important. Akshaya is this limitless quality. Just like we had that, you know, change with Yama to Niyama, and we have this with like Sura, Asura, the Asuras, the beings without light. Well, Akshaya is not diminishing, right? There's this quality of diminishing, and it's not doing that. And so this blessing is that anything we put our energy into on this day, anything we invest in, will grow exponentially, right? It will not ever be limited. This is the idea. And so many people will invest in gold or, you know, jewels, money, I don't know, whatever people invest in this day, to bring abundant blessings in this way, right? They pray to Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth. They pray sometimes to Lord Kuber, who's the god of wealth, and also Vishnu, who is the consort of Lakshmi, and sort of, you know, the bringer of or the maintainer of what we've created. So in this case, you know, if you're going for wealth, we have Jupiter joined, and Jupiter is the symbol of optimism, luck, you know, growth, expansion, and in the sign of Taurus specifically, that a lot of that can surround money. Now, Kritika's quality really calls upon us for more of a spiritual path, and to really see through what is true wealth. What are we really growing here? And this, I would say, is going to continue even as the moon moves into Rohini. So I just flipped it a day later. So now we're on May 9th. And depending on where you live, the third TT is going to begin, like, I think probably in the evening time in, say, the East Coast of the United States, which is 6 hours later than where I live in Hawaii. So there's going to be a beginning to this third TT that's coming, but it's later in this move, right? We're already pretty well into Taurus at this point. So my point is just that the blessings abound all 3 days that the moon is in Taurus. And what you're going to see that's happening on this last day is that this is Hawaii time, 6:22 a.m. So add 6 hours to get you to East Coast time. That's 12:22 in the afternoon. Look where the moon is. Moving to Gemini, right? Moving to Gemini. By 7 a.m. Hawaii time, we're going to have the moon in Gemini already. It won't even be exalted anymore. And so this is why it's important to pay attention to where the timing of things and why they are the way they are. Because Tritiya itself is a victorious Titi. The third Titi is a victorious Titi. The second Titi, Dwitiya, is actually blessed and auspicious and has specifically to do with wealth. So the reasoning for having this Tritiya is really tied to the fact that often the new moon will be at the very early degrees of Aries. And in order to ensure the moon is exalted, we had to do this 3-day thing. It's not because the second day isn't blessed when the moon is there and that it has to be this third phase, particularly if you're working towards things like material wealth. The second day is actually a beautiful day to bring yourself investments in that realm. And of course, for each of us, it is really different. You know, if you're a Taurus or a Gemini person, at least half of this experience is happening in your 12th house. So you might want to look at what it is. You know, for a Gemini, for example, it's their second lord of wealth in the 12th house of loss. So are you investing in something that day? I don't know. I wouldn't be. So I think that, I mean, you know, financially, but you can invest in something different than that, right? You can invest in a different way of looking at things. And so this is where we really tune into the more spiritual qualities of what we're looking at. And the story of Lakshmi that I like the most of all the stories, she's my favorite story of her, is when her and Vishnu come down to earth and settle in Varanasi in this form of Lord Jagannatha. Like he creates this temple and she's his consort, and they just enormous wealth comes to them in this place in Varanasi, this temple, which there's, you know, been a rebuilt one that's in Varanasi today. All the different people come, all the offerings come, all the money comes, bounty is blessed. Well, one day Lakshmi is walking around the, you know, nearby areas, and she sees the poor people. You know, she sees people who are not living in abundance. They don't come into their temple. It's all the rich people coming into their temple, giving them all these offerings and blessings. But there's these poor people around the city edge. And so she decides to start bringing them some food, and she starts blessing them up in different ways. Well, when Vishnu finds out, he's upset because he's really trying to follow the law, right? The way that this is the way, this is the alignment of things. You know, these people ended up with that lot in life. These people ended up here. We're supposed to have these people come bring us money in our temple, you know, and this is just the way it is. This is just the social order. And I don't know what to say about it, but you can't go out and keep feeding those people. Well, Lakshmi was pissed, you know, she's like, you can't tell me I can't go feed poor people. There's people who need food. I'm going to go feed them. You know, I'm going to go give them blessings. So she left and she moved herself to the outskirts of the city, and she started offering people food and different blessings. And pretty soon there was this thriving village outside of the main town, and the temple started to fall apart. And no one was bringing anything to it. There was no bounty coming. There was nothing, you know, none of the wealth was pouring in anymore. And Vishnu's sitting there like, oh my goodness, you know, I guess Lakshmi was kind of important. I don't, you know, like, I guess I need to go apologize to my wife. And so he went out to the outskirts of the city and saw her there with a long line of people waiting for food. And he came up with his bowl and asked her, you know, if she would give him some food. And she did, and they made up. And she said, you know, just don't ask me to do that again. Don't tell me that only blessings are going for these wealthy people. It's like the sort of, you know, ancient trickle down effect where we're gonna give all the blessings to the rich people and it's somehow gonna make their way to the poor people. She's like, that's just not, you know, that doesn't work for me. And so this is what I tune into every Akshaya Tritiya, because it's really, or really any time we're focusing on Lakshmi, because I think that what happened with Lakshmi is that there's a lot of emphasis on gold and wealth and prosperity and even things like fertility, which is beautiful. You know, yes, we want to grow things on this earth. We want to grow babies in our belly, perhaps. You know, we want to have abundance. Of course, there's nothing wrong with having lots of abundance. But when we're coming from a mentality of what we can get from God, we have to really think about that. Right? What we're trying to get. And as an astrologer, people come to me to get things a lot. You know, they want to get a reading that tells them when they're going to get their wealth, their fame, their marriage, their perfect life that they've been looking for. And the truth of the matter is you're not going to get it, right? That's not how it works. It's not just something that you get. It's something that you give. It's something that you do. It's something that it's an energy you put out. And when you think about investing in something that is going to have never diminishing returns, is that gold, that you're wanting to put forward? Is that the energy you want to put into the universe? Is that the karma you're creating for yourself? Or are you trying to create for yourself a karma of a life of never, never diminishing love, never diminishing planting of the earth, not just to give me food, but because the earth needs to be taken care of, because we need to have food for everyone, because we need to, make sure that we are honoring this place that we live and that we call home. Likewise with our body. Can we give ourselves health? This is the temple that is taking care of us on our tenure here on earth. What are we investing in? What are we stacking ourselves full of sweets or processed food, or are we caring for ourselves with nurturing whole foods? How are we engaging with our community around us? What are we offering our community? Are we just taking from our community, or are we giving back to our community? So these are the kind of questions I like to ask myself. And again, in my breakdown for all 12 signs, I really focus on what is best for each person. And believe it or not, there are some people where it's really going to be a blessed time for bringing in money, and hopefully something more than just this idea of themselves gaining more and more and more wealth, but maybe towards something that they're trying to work on, maybe some offering they're having towards, for the community, or some project they're bringing into fruition that's really going to nurture the souls of a lot of people. Other people, it's a time to really look at things in a different way, and look at the attachments you're giving up and the ways in which you can nurture your own body and your own health, or these different things. So I recommend looking at that report if you want to kind of get an idea of what you can be looking at in this Akshaya Tritiya. And I also recommend looking at it as not just one day, but it's really actually like 3 days from the 8th, 9th, and 10th that you have this opportunity to tune into your blessings, and to feel gratitude first and foremost, right? The gratitude we show first for what we already have. And then how are we wanting to move forward in the world? What are we going to do about that? How are we bringing that forward in a way that feels good? And with Venus being joined in Aries for this new moon, we can see that some of our intentions might be a little selfish, or they might have blinders on how they affect other people. So if we can allow ourselves, oh, and there was one more thing I wanted to show you guys. I flipped off of here, but I wanted to show you how when the moon moves into Gemini, we have this drishti that's really much stronger on the 11th, so after Akshaya Tritiya. But on the 10th, Mercury moves into, so yeah, I'll go back to the 10th first. Sorry, a little. Mercury's jumping over this Gandanta point for the 3rd time, right? We had Mercury go into Aries, retrograde back into Pisces, join the North Node, and now he's finally separating himself from the North Node and jumping into Aries himself. And Mercury is again debilitated in Pisces. This is where our mind is in a sea and kind of lost. And particularly with the heavy influence of Rahu, we've had a lot of maybe some really cool insights, but also maybe some confusion and incapacity to deal with some of the details. So Mercury's now landing on the 10th, and actually I think he lands right before, yeah, we have this sweet spot right at 6:22 Hawaii time, where the moon is still in Taurus and Mercury is now in Aries. And then Mercury jumps, and then the moon jumps into Gemini. And this is going to be a time when we start to really put forward our ideas into action. So the things we've been kind of rumbling with, but maybe going back and forth over and sitting in and stewing around and kind of having brilliant insights, but not necessarily making anything happen with, this can kind of start to come into concrete reality as Mercury moves into Aries. Now that little sweet spot we have isn't probably going to be that perfect moment, just because Mercury's still very much in the Gandanta at this point. And, it will take a little bit of time, like a day, to get us out of that place. But when we think about what we're investing in and what we want to manifest, we have to recognize that there's an action element here on our own part, right? We're not just praying to deities to give us things. We're doing things and we're putting forth intentions. And those intentions are things we follow through with different action. And Aries is a beautiful place for that to happen. So if we take ourselves out of the realm of trying to get something, especially from other people, with Venus being in Aries, we can instead focus on how we're creating, what we're creating, and how we're going to move forward with those action items that we've been actually kind of playing with and jotting down for quite some time now as Mercury danced around in the sky. And then I just wanted to show that, look, we've got this direct drishti from Rahu Mars on the moon. It's a one-way 4-house drishti on our moon here on the 11th. And this, and now this Mercury in Aries. And so this is kind of firing us up in a place where we sometimes start to vacillate or feel split. And if we can focus our mind in a really powerful way, through meditation practices, we can really find clarity here. There's some deep diving going on with Mars in Uttara Bhadrapada here. And that deep spiritual dive requires some practices, some things that we do that really help bring us to clarity in our mind. And so I love this drishti for meditating and for bringing ourselves to auspiciousness. There's a whole story around Ardra, but I've told it before and it'll have to wait for another day. Also, I forgot to mention that the Saturn drishti on this new moon is very strong. And of course, now we have the moon moved back, but we can get her back here soon enough, close enough. Saturn's drishti on our moon and sun is giving us this addition to Yama's quality of restraint, right? Really allowing us to see the practical concerns in our world because it's Aquarius, but for each of us, again, it's a different house. And that third house is showing us a willful quality. So it is our will imposing the practical boundaries that we're setting. It's not divinity. It's not faith. It's not God that's putting these practical boundaries on. It's us. It's our own will saying this is what needs to be in order to take care of this practical fear that I have. And it's important to understand that third house element to it, that it's our own hands doing it. It's our own mind doing it and our own intentions. It's not like because it's meant to be that there needs to be these restraints. It's just what we need in order for us to be able to sort of manhandle the situation in a way that feels safe to us and that feels good to this. And this is also where Saturn is debilitated. This is where Saturn really has the hardest time. So the fact that Saturn's in his own sign, really holding down some solid awarenesses and projecting this forward into a place where we sometimes have trouble with boundaries. We sometimes struggle with our boundaries here. And he's kind of helping us put those perhaps artificial boundaries on, but things that help to contain us. Like if, sometimes when artists make something, they have to wire it or tape it or do something for it to be created. And then they can remove whatever they had that was holding it there. So this is how I have that image in my mind. And I'm going to let you go now, but happy and blessed new moon and Akshaya Tritiya. And I wish many things for you to unfold in unlimited ways. Namaste.